Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another week's reflection on the Feast of Christ the King, the last Sunday in our liturgical year. Next week we begin the journey of Advent, the time of waiting as we prepare for the great festival of Christmas, whatever that may look like under our COVID circumstances this year. I hope that you're well. I hope that you're finding what you need through friends or family, through other endeavours that's keeping you connected to the world and to your well-being. And I hope that this continues as whatever circumstances you may find yourselves in. As the situation in South Australia is showing us, nothing is certain at any stage around this pandemic and this virus. So I guess we must keep vigilant, and the great call to be awake or stay awake in Advent is true for us all, no matter where we are around the world. In our Gospel this week, Matthew has some very challenging words. He doesn't mess about. And you can get distracted with sheep and goats and judgment and how Christ is going to rule the world and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think this passage is about justice. And justice is one of the deepest longings of the human being. And no matter where in the world we are, we face, in a sense, an injustice each day through one form or another. There are some, of course, that are suffering more than others. And in my commentaries this week, I quite like the phrase that justice is about bringing the world back into balance. I've never thought of it like this before, and actually that's quite simple, really, isn't it? That the notion that bringing the world back into balance is something that we've all had to reflect on, especially during 2020. It's probably fair to say that through our scriptural account, that this notion of justice, of bringing the world back into balance, is actually at the deepest part of God's heart. The deepest part of God's desire for human beings. And so these words of Matthew this week show us that justice is not achieved through force, violence, a great sweeping of evil away off the earth. But the justice the balance of the world is returned by connecting with the other, by visiting someone who is less off than we are, visiting someone who's trapped, whether that be in jail or through mental illness or through other anxieties. To feed those who are hungry, to quench the thirst of those who are thirsty. We can do this to our neighbours. Of course, if you'd like to extend that to confronting slavery in our world, the second biggest industry around the world at the moment, that's the slave trade, or confronting the drug trade, which is the biggest industry around our world. I know it doesn't make sense, does it? But that's the reality. So whether it's a small task or a big task, Matthew is inviting us to act, not to reflect, not to navel gaze, not to wait for God to move us, that in fact we must move first, and then God will meet us where actually God genuinely is. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus has denounced his own people, and in fact especially the leaders, for not behaving or acting as they know they should have in this regard. The judgment is severe. But maybe this notion of judgment is not so much an event that takes place at a certain time in a certain place, but this idea of a reckoning with God, finding out whether we have made it or not into God's presence. This notion of an engaging mission on the earth is an ongoing invitation. It's something that just doesn't happen once or twice throughout our life, but is constantly ongoing, and is one of those challenges for us in our pilgrimage of faith, as it were. Jesus does indeed become the ruler, as it were, of the world, that helps bring this balance, a rightful balance, back to it. But he does it through suffering, through death, and through the joy of the resurrection. And therefore the mission that you and I are invited to respond to is actually a mission of hope and joy, rather than death and destruction. So I invite us, as we come to the end of one liturgical year and enter another, and as we prepare for Christmas, how can you and I really bring hope and joy to those around us in simple but effective ways, as a response to Matthew's call to us, command to us, or an invitation into returning the balance to the world in which we live. I wish you well and every blessing. We'll see you next week.